Hi folks, how are you doing? Here on the matchup USA versus Hungary, we saw on the fourth board, if I'm not mistaken, the clash of the two best uh, players or two of the best players from this Olympiad at least. By performance so far, we had Sam Shankland with white pieces against Judith Polgar with black. Now both of these players have been astonishing at this tournament, I think, and I may be mistaken, but I think Shankland has won every single game he's played so far in the tournament, like 5 out of 5 or 6 out of 6, not sure. And Judith, I think, had only made a draw. Maybe it was against a Kopian from Armenia, if I'm not mistaken, and had won all the rest of her games in this case. So they were having both very great tournaments so far, and otherwise the matchup was very interesting. Lots of strong players there, like Leko, Kamskin, Nakamura involved. So good matchup and a good game, as we're gonna see right now. There we go. Sam Shankland is white, as I said. He plays 1d4, and we go into a Indian defense. More concretely, the Bogo-Indian defense, which we saw, for instance, recently in the very spectacular and crazy game by Grishuk against Filipov. In that game, Grishuk had a really crazy and brutal attack, checkmating black very soon. Knight bd2 as Grishuk chose. Lots of choices here, of course, for black, lots of possibilities. And Polgar chose the b6 to put the bishop on the b7 square. After a3, she decides to take. Queen takes, and she goes ahead to put the bishop on b7, controlling very firmly this e4 key square, as usually black does in the Nimzo-Indian or Queens-Indian defenses. This is an important strategical point for black, having given up the bishop pair. He usually is in control of light squares like this key e4 square, not allowing white e4, of course. So Sham plays e3, and here interesting move, a5, not allowing or making it very difficult to play b4, having a great pawn chain here for white, so controlling b4 for good. So Shankland plays b3 because anyway this is the diagonal this bishop is going to be placed on, trying to be effective on the big diagonal. And now we have some interesting moves. d6, I guess typical in the Nimzo-Indians, I think, controlling lots of squares here with this little center. A little bit restricted, but a solid scheme, solid position for black, I think. Now some developing, easy to understand move, knight to bd7, bishop b2, both players castle. According to my database, this line apparently is a favorite of players like Korchnoi or Vladimir Kopian with p. Queen e7, and this is supporting e5, also sometimes c5. These are pawn breaks that black usually tries in the Nimzo or Queens-Indian defense, I think. And ideally, why black would get this e5 counterblast. Not that easy to make it right now, but Queen c2 was played here. Really, this must be a theoretical battle or something. I'm just not updated of this, of course, not having that much idea, just general principles or ideas. And I'm wondering here if bishop e4 is a move for black here, getting some pieces here on e4, molesting that queen a little bit. And actually I found an old game by Ullmann from Germany, if I'm not mistaken, with white and Bronstein, the legendary Russian GM or Soviet GM, we may say, with black pieces, which weren't really complicated after queen c3, c5, rook to d1, a4 with black, b4, the rook went to c8, d-take, Bronstein took on c5, allowing this passed pawn, pretty complicated stuff. So this is a game which happened after this bishop e4 move, which I was wondering about here in this position. I mean, it seems that like white is asking for it, isn't he? But okay, this is Judith Polgar played another move. She played c5, really solid, striking, counter-blasting into the center. Now rook fd1, h6, rook ac1, and rook fc8. Sam here closes the queen side, hoping to get an initiative if the center gets opened. And Judy takes a committing decision here, taking on d4. Of course, now she has a rook on an open file where the enemy queen is. And now knight takes to d4 was played. I guess this knight is heading to the beautiful and interesting b6 square. d6 is potentially weak as it's on an open file for white. So some strategical things going on right now. Judith puts a knight on c5 and immediately bishop to a3. Activating the bishop, white wouldn't mind, I guess, at all to take this active knight on c5, giving out the bishop pair. But it happens that black puts another knight on e4. In case white takes, she can replace it. Knight to b5, and Judith blasts open the center with d5. Well, not sure if that's the best decision here, but the position is pretty complicated. With black must find a plan, so just white has the bishop pair and can do nothing better than black can do that. So after d5 there is a pin, of course, here on this diagonal. f3 first by black, getting away that knight back. Now queen to b2, getting the right away from the c file. e5 seems like Judy is getting some central pawns moving. C takes, knight takes, and now e4, knight f4, and bishop to c4. We're reaching an interesting position in which I think favors white. I mean, white has a good knight on b5, an excellent bishop on c4. Both his rooks looking very good on open files. The bishop here exerting some pressure, putting some pressure on this dark square diagonal, pinning the knight. On the other hand, black has some good pieces. The knight, which although it's pinned, it's not that bad. The other knight on f4 controlling some squares, but the bishop is hitting on a wall here on e4, and the rook on a8. It's not clear what's doing there. So I think favorable for white. Nothing that great, nothing to go crazy about, but better position, easier to play for white, I assume. White, apart from everything, has the bishop pair, which is like having some savings in the bank. So rook to d8, king h1. Not really sure if this was necessary, kind of prophylactic move, I guess, but there it goes. Sam Shankland, strong GM, talented GM. He knows what he's doing for sure. Rooks are exchanged. Rook to d8, queen c2, and there it goes. The other pairs of rook disappear. Judy plays queen g5 with a not very subtle threat of checkmating white in one move, and hopefully for white, Sam Shankland saw the threat queen to d2. And Judith here sacrifices a piece for 2 pawns, taking with the knight on e4. And now taking with the pawn, putting even more pressure on g2. But it seems that white has enough resources to defend it and kind of consolidate his material advantage with bishop f1. Then some maneuvering game follows. The white bishop on a3 is recycled to the c1 square, doing some job on this diagonal. Queen g4 getting away from the pin, and knight c3. Pieces are being relocated. g5, putting here some control on the f4 knight. Queen c2, king g7, bishop to e3, attacking b6 simply. Queen to e6, king g1, and now bishop to d7, defending b6. Knight to b5, knight d5, the bishop must do something, so it goes back. Knight to f4. Here, I mean, some technique is needed, but of course it is white who is in the driver's seat, looking for the way to win this position, being up a piece for 2 pawns, having the bishop pair. Still not that easy. Knight c7, queen to g4, once again putting lots of pressure on g2. But now white takes on b6, a pawn, and also defends g2 with the queen. Knight h3 check, king h1, queen f4. Judith Polgar constantly looking for threats and activity. Now checkmate, trying to checkmate white on the back rank, taking the bishop on f1. But queen c4 defends that threat, and now queen d2, trying to get active there. Taking advantage that this pawn is pinned, it cannot take as the bishop is there on b7. Queen e2, of course white would love to exchange queens. This is a piece up position for him for only a pawn. Queen c1, now knight e8 check, king f8, a beautiful centralization move here by the knight. To d6, controlling almost everything on the board. First of all, attacking the unprotected bishop on b7, controlling lots of light squares here, and also eventually having an eye here on f7, which could be supported by, for instance, queen f3 and with some nasty threats there. Bishop to d5 also defends f7, not only getting away from the attack, also attacks b3, so multi-proposal move, but bishop e3, back attacking the queen, queen b1, queen d3. Judith keeps refusing the queen exchange. Now knight c4, attacking e5, attacking a5, and also cutting black's attack with the bishop, at least on b3. Judith took on b3. Here it seems, well, Sam Shankland went queen d3, which cannot be a bad move, of course, but it seems he had a much stronger move, very beautiful and strong idea here with bishop c5 check. And since the best black has is not to go into the e file or to g7 where white would take e5 with a check, so after king g8 white still takes that pawn, attacks the bishop, and has some daily ideas. For instance, on the back rank this king may be very vulnerable, and after a move which could be natural at the first sight, like bishop to e6, defending the back rank and getting away from the unprotected d5 square. Now surprise surprise, bishop to d5, and black is almost getting checkmated here through the very vulnerable dark square. So this was interesting alternative, a very strong move it seems, this bishop c5 check for Sam Shankland. Instead he goes queen d3, and now Judith gives up and exchange the queens. Now this is a matter of some technique. So knight f4, bishop takes, e takes, knight takes a5. White is up a knight for a pawn. Judith tries to resist a little bit more, but this is hopeless, I guess. f3, g takes, bishop takes, king g1, bishop d1 attacking the pawn, but white can easily defend it, for instance, with bishop b5. King back comes to the center, knight to c4, creating some barrier here not to allow this king to come too near. Bishop f3, a5, f6, a6, king d8, and after king f2, bishop h1, you may want to stop the video to try to find the most beautiful and instructive way to win this game. Pretty much cutting out this bishop from the game, like isolating him in a jail. This is an interesting maneuver and a beautiful one. I pretty much liked it. The move is knight to e3 with the threat, unstoppable threat, by the way, to put the knight on g2 and isolating this bishop, forcing it to be exchanged for the knight, otherwise king g1 winning it. So this is game over, of course. Black is exchanging his last piece, and the king is getting the job done here, taking all the pawns and winning the game for white, for USA here. An incredible tournament so far. So for Sam Shankland, the young and talented player from the United States of America, with a perfect score, if I'm not mistaken, surely going for the gold medal on the fourth board wherever he's playing. So far, an astonishing tournament in the Olympiad in Tromsø here for Sam Shankland. Thanks for watching.